Hello and welcome back to another episode of Voices of Western. This is the Humans of Western podcast, and I'm your host for today, Hussein. Today, I'm so delighted to be back with another one of our alumni episodes featuring Stephanie Curcio. She did her undergraduate degree in neurosciences at U of T and later pursued law school at Western. Aside from that, she's been really involved in AIs and patent strategy and is currently the CEO and co-founder of NLPatent, which is a leading AI-based patent search and analytics platform. There's a lot to cover. We'll discuss more about her journey, how she got to where she is today, and have some interesting conversations about AI and patents. And yeah, that's it from my end for now. I will pass it on to Steph to give a brief introduction about herself as well.
Yeah, thanks, Hussein. It's a pleasure to be here speaking with you and your audience about my journey and my time at Western. As you mentioned, I am the CEO and co-founder of NLPatent. It's a patent research platform built upon a large language model that we've designed and built internally. So it's an exciting time to be an AI company, of course, as AI technologies have gotten extremely commercially useful across a number of industries. Legal industry, certainly one of them, and IP is one of them as well. So my journey has prepared me, I guess, for my role as the CEO of a tech company. And my time at Western was very much enjoyed. So I did pursue law school at Western. I was very involved in the IP committee when I was there, and I was actually president of the IP committee. And then I went on to become an IP lawyer working at a big law firm on Bay Street, and then quit my job to start this company. So we'll talk about, I'm sure, many different aspects of my journey as we delve into some questions.
Amazing. Thank you so much for this. Why don't we start with with the very beginning, your upbringing, where you grew up, how did you get introduced to all of this?
Sure. So I grew up in Markham, which is, I'm sure many of your listeners know, is sort of a suburb of Toronto, about half an hour, could be up to an hour and a half, depending on traffic, north of Toronto. And I grew up there with my parents, who were both hairdressers, and I went on to be the first person in my family to graduate high school, and then the first person in my family to go to university, and then of course, the first person in my family to become a lawyer and go to law school. So all of that was pretty exciting. It was pretty new, and it was an incredible experience. I look back on my upbringing very fondly. I have a sister who also went to the University of Toronto. She didn't go to Western, unfortunately, but so her and I kind of grew up together through it all.
Amazing. And then growing up, what was your take on, pursuing an education in university? Was it something that you always saw yourself pursuing?
Yeah, it's a good question. I always was academically inclined. I was gifted academically as a young person. So starting in grade 5, I was put into a gifted class, and then went through high school in that gifted class, went to advanced placement classes as well. And so always with the same people who were all super smart. And it was a exciting group of people to be part of educational journey with. We still all keep in touch. And so, yes, I mean, academics was always something I was very strong in, particularly math and science, which is why I went to U of T for science, and then went into neuroscience from there. But I always really liked to write. So I actually did a double major in neuroscience and political science, which is like super random, but I just really liked studying politics and some history associated with it. One of my favorite classes in undergrad was actually like the history of Russian politics, which I thought was like really interesting. So that's very random, but that's the beauty of education. You can kind of just follow your passions and just take courses that interest you. And sometimes they have no rhyme or reason. And then sometimes, all of your interesting educational experiences come back to help you later on in your life.
Amazing. Yeah, absolutely. I probably can't imagine how that political sciences major part of your education was helpful when it comes to writing long and long papers in law school. research, proposals, all of those things that come with the nature of law school. I
Exactly.
guess it's very interesting when people are pursuing something in the sciences field, usually what they think is going to med school. And I think you are no exception as well. You were initially considering going to medical school. When did that pivot happen of, you changing your mind from pursuing an education in medical school and then deciding to apply for law school?
Yes, I did want to be a doctor. That was something that I always felt like I wanted to pursue. My sister, who I mentioned, she was diagnosed with leukemia when she was 4, so I was involved from sort of a bystander perspective in the medical process, and I saw some good doctors, some bad doctors, and I felt like I could be a really good doctor, and so that's why I wanted to pursue that initially. But then, the glorification of a profession kind of, shines its head and then quickly gets thrown away when you see what it's actually like to be in the day to day of that role. So after undergrad, I went to India for 2 months by myself after having never traveled anywhere at all ever. And
Oh,
I
so
went
your
just
first
randomly to India.
international travel.
Yeah, first international travel to India was to India, and it was a rural village in the south part of India where I lived in a hospital and volunteered at a hospital. And it was eye-opening experience. So I was exposed to just like a public health crisis that was happening in these poor regions. Like literally, people would take like latex gloves and wash them and hang them up to dry and then reuse them with new patients, even in surgery. And it was just like mind blowing. And I was just blown away by just how atrocious the public health system is when there's not appropriate resources allocated to the hospitals and doctors, et cetera. So that sort of like opened my mind and opened my eyes up to the problems in the medical system. And I just was kind of turned off, I guess, for lack of a better word, from pursuing that. And so when I returned back to Canada, I carried on in a research lab that I was working in as an undergraduate student. And I did some neuroscience research with a wonderful professor who I adore. Her name is Professor Joanne Nash. She's still at the University of Toronto. And she does Parkinson's research. And I stayed in her lab and was working there. But research at a high level is very interesting. But as like a, very junior undergraduate student or new grad, you end up doing very repetitive tasks. And I'm sure this kind of rings true just throughout when you're doing experiments. You just do things again and again and again and again to prove something right or wrong. I mean, it's hard to prove something right, but eventually you might try to prove yourself wrong. And those repetitive tasks were just, not super intriguing to me. And so I was thinking about, doing graduate work in neuroscience because I did really like studying neuroscience. And anyways, what ended up happening is I went to the professor I was working for and I kind of presented her with this idea, and she sort of convinced me that I would be better suited in a different profession, just based on like my interest, my personality, and some of her experiences. So I was sort of convinced by her and some other people that maybe law school was a good route for me. And so I applied to law school without even writing the LSAT. And then, at the 11th hour, I wrote the LSAT and did well enough to get in. And so here we are.
There's a very interesting aspects in your story, and I think the biggest one here is based on the timeline you described, you didn't rush into going to grad school right after graduating from U of T. You took some time, explored the different volunteer opportunities when it wasn't something you wanted to do. You ended up going back to your neuroscience research. And then based on that feedback and clarity, and I guess supposedly kind of like a gap year, you were able to see a potential in law school and then applied. Would you say that's a fair assessment of the situation at the time?
Absolutely. Yeah, it was actually 2 years. So I took 2 years in between undergrad and law school. And on top of working in the lab, I was also working as a server and bartender at a restaurant that's no longer in existence because this was over 10 years ago. But anyways, yeah, so that's what I was doing, and I was saving some money, and I took a 200-hour yoga teacher training course, and I got really into yoga when I was in India. And so anyways, that's sort of like Eat, Pray, Love, or whatever that movie was at that
Yeah.
time. And so that's what I did. I was just doing some soul searching and just trying to figure out, like, what I was going to be passionate about, and that was a really good thing for me. And I always encourage people to take time. And like, I have a kid, my kid is 2, so he's not going to university anytime soon. But I always say, I will encourage him to take time and not go straight to undergrad. Because I think it's important for you to like really understand why you're going and doing something rather than just jumping in and doing it because everybody else is doing it. So, having that time in between was like extremely helpful for me. And it actually made me, a more interesting person. And being an interesting person is a really important thing when you're applying for jobs, because people that just do like, went to undergrad and then went to law school and then never worked anywhere ever, or like have any real life experience besides like a library, that's, you're like not that interesting. So I think it's important to like have something that you do. And I don't mean you need to take time off, if you're really passionate about, and you're sure you're sure you know what you want to do ahead of time, that's fine. But, try to spread yourself around a little bit and do something interesting with your time so that you're a more interesting candidate than just your grades and your resume of nothing, really.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we are at a time where people think that they have to jump into masters right away, even if they have no plans or no intentions of really or clarity on what to do exactly after the master's program. I know myself, I was so confused as to what to do after my undergrad that I decided to take some time off, work, and use this time to learn more about my interests and be strategic about it so that if one day I want to go to, let's say, law school like yourself or med school or even business school, then I at least have that clarity that this is what I need and how it's going to benefit me. And honestly, last time I checked, education is expensive, so it's also an investment that is worth, researching and being confident in the decision.
I agree, but it takes some balls to recognize that you need to take time. It's very easy just to like jump into the next thing and like have another program and like another program, always working towards some goal that you don't even know what the goal is. And so having like a year program gives people a lot of comfort. And so I think it takes courage to recognize, like, what, I'm going to take a step back and I'm going to take, a little bit of time, set myself a deadline, like to make a like, decision or whatever, and then like reflect again. It does take courage to do that. So it's not an easy thing to just do. So I just wanted to mention that, just thinking about what you just said.
Absolutely. And I think it would have a more interesting story as we kind of discussed earlier on. Being different, being unique is good. It's not always a bad thing. And in this case, I think it's good.
I think it's always a good thing.
Going back to your law school experience at Western, if you were to describe it to students who have never had friends in law school or never really stepped into that arena, how would you describe it? Like, what was the curriculum like? How was the life like at the time?
Yeah. We talked about this a little bit on our like prep call, and in like saying these things out loud to you, I realize how like unique it is and different from like a regular program or regular experience, and like reflecting on what that actually means and how I can compare that to an experience that people or your listeners be more familiar with. Law school is kind of like high school. Okay. So you get to law school and it's like a small, like 300 people. I don't know how many people are there now. I went to law school over 10 years ago. And 300-ish people, and you kind of like know everybody, right? And there's like 3 years in law school. So there's like, the three levels of like people there, just kind of like high school, you know, you have four in high school. And then, you know, you have a homeroom, and your homeroom has 20 people, and you really get chummy with those 20 people, and you're in every class with those people. And you kind of like go through and, you know, really get immersed in it in a very unique way. And you have events that are all for your law school, and, you know, you have, you know, all of these unique activities that like is special for law school and all this stuff. And we have like our own library, and we have like, and you asked me like, did you never went to Weldon? And I was like, I forgot that was the name of the library. Like, no, I've never been to Weldon. Why would I go to Weldon? We have our own library. So like all of these things, like, you know, it's just very high schooly in like the best way, because you're not like an awkward teenager anymore. Like, you're an adult that, you know, has like a genuine opinion about things, and like has some life skills under the belt. So anyways, that's kind of what I would explain, how I would explain law school to somebody who's never been to law school.
It's good. And then you start developing those bonds early on, you know, carry them over the years of careers as well. I would imagine the benefit would be if you're looking for a job at a law firm or other opportunities, then it's so much easier to get them from people that know you and know your work ethic, as opposed to trying to pitch yourself to people who have no knowledge of your previous work experiences too.
Yeah, and not only that, but like I have a whole network of lawyers now. Like, if I need anything, any legal work, I have somebody that I can call that knows something about some random area of law that I don't know. And like, I'm sort of like the resident IP person. So anytime somebody has IP questions, they just come and contact me. And, you know, law school is another thing that you mentioned, is like building relationships. And I want to highlight how true that is. And so first day of law school, you know, I walked into the, you know, I'm pretty bubbly personality. I walked into like the big hall, and I go, but I sit down beside this girl who I thought looked really friendly, and I turned on like, hi, my name's Steph. And she looks at me and she's like, oh, hi, I'm also Steph. And her and I became best friends. And of course, I found out later that she was very hungover from the night before. I was not, but anyways, this is sort of like what you learn about people, and you build these relationships very quickly, and they get solidified very quickly, because you're going through this like big life change together at a very interesting time of your life, where you're like, you know, early 20s, you know, experiencing like a big bad new world together. And yeah, my three best friends, I met them all in law school.
Amazing. And do you have any favorite memories that come to your mind about contributions to the law school that you had at the time, or just anything that comes to your mind?
Oh, there's so many memories. We had such a great class. Um, our year was a really fun year, a very smart year. Something that I loved about law school is like, you know, I obviously like, you know, big keener. I liked to participate in class and like get part of like, you know, the debates that happen in class. And those were really memorable and very cool, because everybody's really smart and, you know, exchanging ideas in a very healthy way. Like, it's not like, you know, argumentative in the sense that, you know, you feel like it's like anybody's accosting you. You're just exchanging ideas and sharing viewpoints. We had some like great social events that were really fun. Every other Wednesday, I think, we used to have like a pub night just for the law school. And it was a lot of fun. It was just across, it was at the Seeps, I think, usually. I lived on the other side of Victoria Park. So it was like very close to where I lived. And so I often had like a pre-party at my place before, and that was really fun. And so our pub nights were called Dennings, named after Lord Denning, who was an English judge at the Court of Appeal, who had like a lot of influence on the common law, and he had these like kind of crazy decisions that he used to render. And so he is sort of like the most famous English judge, and we just named our pub nights after him. So those were fun. I don't know. I just loved law school. Like, I just can't stress enough to you how much I loved law school and how what a different vibe it was from like my undergrad, going to U of T, living at home with my parents and commuting to school, and then moving to London, which is like not that far, right? But far enough that I had my own independence, and then, immersed in this great educational experience with all of these very smart people who I really liked, and many of them became my close friends. So yeah, it was just awesome.
I was also thinking about, your biking experience to campus too. Is is this something you want to share about as well?
Yeah, sure. So I lived just very close to where the Seeps is, and like most of your listeners will know where the Seeps is, and if you don't, then you must not live in London. So I lived like close to there, and I biked every day from there, like that area, campus to law school every day. And it was about 5 kilometers, like maybe a little more than 5 kilometers. So it's not crazy far, but far enough that when you get like big snowfalls, as you do, I'm that guy on a bike, like a crazy person. Sometimes I'd wear ski goggles because it's snowing and I didn't want to get the snow in my eyes. And my friends who were like, they'd always like, do you want to ride? And I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm just going to bike. And they're like, you are literally insane. And so I'd be biking and they'd be honking at me like, hey, there's Steph. And I'm like, oh, hey, nice to see you. But I liked it because I was so busy. So I did all of my readings, of course, because I was a keener, as I said. And I didn't have time to like exercise as much as I would have liked to. So kill two birds with one stone, get a little bit of exercise in, fresh air, and transportation. Like what could go wrong? Luckily, I never crashed or got into any trouble on my bicycle, but it was a fun experience.
And so I'm very uneducated when it comes to riding a bike during the winter. Did you have to get like winter tires for your bike, or how did that work?
Nope. Nope, I just rode my bike, just my regular bike, and I still have the same bike. So I bought my bike. It's a Linus like Dutchy, which is like it's like like step through bike. So it has like a bar that goes down instead of straight across. And so like a Dutch style bike, right? And I rode that bike. I bought that bike right before I started law school in 2012. And I still ride the exact same bike in Toronto today. Like it's in my backyard right now. Like that's the same bike. And it's just a great bike. And I love it. And I've never like I had to change the tires over the years, but the tires are like thin enough that they can kind of like cut through the snow, but not so thin that you get like traction issues. I don't know. It just worked.
Just work. Still works, 10 years or 12 years later.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So now this is also a perfect segue into our hot take section. And the question I have for you today is, what's your take on the portrayal of lawyers in TV shows like Suits compared to the realities of practicing law in the real world?
Yeah. So when I was practicing law on Bay Street, that was like at the time that they were literally filming Suits on Bay Street. And so I would literally be like walking to work, like halfway through the day, or I walk to work halfway through the day, like getting a coffee or something halfway through the day after having been at the office for the last like 5 hours, 6 hours. And I'm like tired and grumpy and just like haven't slept and just like have so much work to do. And I'm seeing these assholes filming the show, like glorifying the profession and just feeling really shitty about them doing that. And portray things on Suits from what I've seen. I've never really like truly watched the show, but from what I understand, there'll be like some very complex legal matter that's like presented at the beginning of the show. And like, oh, we need to like pay attention to this thing. And like by the end of the episode, it's like solved. Oh, there's another day's work. Like, no, that's not the way that the law works. The law is like slow moving, and like, the judiciary system, it just takes forever, and it doesn't happen that way. Like things take years to get resolved. And so, yeah, it's just like not the way that the real world works. That's just one out of many examples of why Suits is not a true portrayal of the legal profession, but makes for good television, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good take. I agree. I think when I watched all of the seasons during COVID time, so I had some extra time on my hands. And you're right. Every episode, or maybe two episodes, a case was solved. There was
Yeah.
a resolution that reached for that case. I like the negotiation aspect of it a lot. Now, I would be lying if I said that it didn't inspire me to go to law school, just to have those type of conversations and environments to be in. But again, talking to people like yourself showed me that this is not like the 100% of what goes on behind the scenes and life that comes with being a lawyer. So I think I changed my mind. I'm currently in my I want to become a real estate agent for luxury houses era, where I'm like
Nice.
watching like Netflix TV shows on that. So we'll see where I end up in like a couple of years. But that was an interesting take. I think, yeah, you're right. They don't want to, not that they don't want to show it, if you think about grabbing audience attention, it's not as much fun to show someone working long hours on a case for months and months.
Of course.
Yeah,
It's
it's not
TV,
going to be
right? It's not
exactly, it's TV.
that's not good TV, right? You need to have some drama and some action and whatever. So um I understand it's TV, but at the same time, when I was very tired and seeing them film it in front of my face, it was like, all right, guys.
Kind of moving on to your journey beyond graduation from law school and moving on to today, really. What keeps you busy these days? How do you help? I know we talked about NLPatent. How do you help today's startups with their IP strategy?
Yeah, so I try to be helpful in advising businesses and other founders on how they can think about their IP. And when people think about IP, they're like, "Ooh, patents! Like we need a patent." And people don't really understand like the arduous process involved with obtaining a patent and securing a patent, and like how much money is involved in not only obtaining the patent but then enforcing that patent. A patent is defined as sort of like the right to exclude others from making, selling, or importing that patented invention within the jurisdiction that you have that protection. So it's just a right. It's not like a foregone conclusion. The government's not going to come in and say, "Oh, Stephanie has a patent." Like, no, like, don't do that. It's my obligation if I have a patent to then stop the person that is infringing my patent from doing that thing. And so a patent is only as good as your ability to enforce it at the end of the day, if that's the strategy behind it. So I think people really need to unpack, like take a step back and unpack how they're thinking about their commercial strategy, what they want to do as a business before they run into procuring a patent. Because until you have that really solidified and you understand how you want to go to market and what you actually are selling, patent protection could be a major cost sink for you, and it could actually not work out in your favor. And furthermore, people often try to like find the cheapest deal to like get the cheapest patent, but not all patents are created equally. And so if you have a cheap patent, you might have a cheap patent, like might not actually hold water. And it would be easy to invent around. So, I mean, there's so many factors with patent protection that a lot of people just aren't aware of. And so the kind of sister IP right to patent protection is trade secret protection. And that is, as you might be implied by the name, trade secret is a secret. So rather than, disclosing your patent to the patent office and getting, a time limited monopoly on that thing, you actually just don't tell anybody and you just keep it internal. And, it's like the secret sauce behind whatever your company does, and you don't tell anybody about it, and you can keep it a secret for basically as long as you can keep it a secret, rather than having some like time limited aspect to the protection. The problem, of course, is that if somebody finds out or you disclose it publicly, then it is no longer a secret, and you might actually run into some trouble later on. So anyways, it's sort of this juxtapose between protecting your invention through like traditional patent protection, and then also keeping your secret sauce a secret for as long as make commercial sense for your business. So I do try to stay on top of that and try to help people navigate those waters.
Amazing. I think this was a lot to uncover, so I do have a few follow-up questions that I was
Of
curious
course.
to ask you about here. So when it comes to uh, patents not working in your favor or cheap patents, could you describe a bit more what you mean by that? Is it like the lawyers that you pay or the way they file a patent, so in a way that others can easily do a few tweaks here and there and then have essentially the same result with a slightly different design?
Yeah, that's what I mean. So when you think about a patent, like obtaining a patent and talking about a patent lawyer about an invention that you've created. As the inventor, you think about your invention in a very like limited way. So like say I invented this coffee mug. It is a cylinder, a hollow cylinder with a handle. That's my invention. And so if I were to file a patent protection on a hollow cylinder with a handle, as soon as somebody creates a hollow rectangle with a handle, they're not infringing my patent because I've had such a narrow scope of what the invention is. It has to be a cylinder in order for it to be, under the purview of my patent. So it's important for the patent lawyer to do a lot of discovery with the inventor to say, okay, what else could your invention do? How much can we stretch this in order to help you get the maximum protection for your innovation before you start to infringe on everybody else's patents. So that's something that you want to be very conscious of, is just trying to get a lawyer or a patent agent to help you kind of discover what the invention actually is. And that takes time. And unfortunately, it takes time is money when you're talking to lawyers. So it's important to, budget the right amount of money and go through this process when you have the resources to do it properly. That's what I'm trying to say.
Building up on the example that you shared here, so I imagine it's not possible to create a patent on a rectangular shape when you only have a square shape, but would it be possible to patent the experience it delivers? So for example, anything that you can fill with hot drinks and drink from it, for example, or is that just
exactly like
too
that's what you
wide
would
of a...
want to try to you would want to try to get as broad as possible for something along the lines of what you just said, rather than being so narrowly defined. So you want to try to expand it. I use the example of like a chair as well. I've used this recently in a presentation that I gave last week. Like a chair, like a horizontal plane with 4 appendages perpendicular to the floor chair, right? As soon as you take one of the legs away and you have 3 appendages, or you have 5 appendages, like legs, then all of a sudden you're outside of the scope of the protection of the patent. So you want to try to think of how can I draft a patent application so almost like nebulous that it could encompass like any amount of legs, a surface that this doesn't have to be perfectly horizontal, like all of these things, right? Doesn't have to have a handle, right? All of these things have to be taken into account. And the mentor that I had when I was originally learning about patents at the law firm that I worked at, he explained patent drafting to me as 3-dimensional chess. You have to think about all of these different components and all of these different aspects in order to best service your client. And that's the right way you got to think about it. You don't just want to push something through quickly. You want to try to think about the strategy of your client and maximizing the value of their patent, rather than just getting something that's easily you can easily invent around through the examples that I shared earlier.
So all of the chairs that I've seen, I think most of them, if not all, have 4, wooden things that they stand on. Does that mean no patent has ever been filed for chairs? Or does the
I am
uniqueness in
sure there's
design...
patents for chairs, but patents are only good for 20 years. So after 20 years, your invention gets given to the public. So this is like the quid pro quo, as they say, of the patent system. The government is like, hey, people that do research and come up with new ideas, we will give you a 20-year monopoly, like a 20-year head start on your invention, and nobody else can do it because you have the ability to stop them from copying you for 20 years. The catch is that you have to tell us exactly how you've done it. And then after 20 years, and that's what's in the patent application. And after 20 years, it's given to the public, and then the public can just copy it and then improve upon it. So like the whole genesis of the patent system is to try to coax ideas and inventions into the public domain in order to like benefit society, so that people can read patents and be like, okay, now how can I make that better? And then you can file another patent application, or anybody can file a patent that's an improvement upon something that's been done before. So I'm sure there's some patents, I don't know, I'm just using this example like just because it's very tangible and people can like visualize what I just mentioned, but I'm sure there's patents at some point on chairs of some description. And I'm sure there's some listener right now that's going to be Googling this.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. So I guess that is what you meant by trade secret. It's finding the trade-off here of, should I file a patent and run the risk of having it become public too soon and, start the countdown of that 20 years with everyone knowing how it's done? Or should I keep it a secret for as long as possible so that I can, develop it, make it the best it is?
Sort of. I mean, there's some benefit. Like, I mean, I don't want to get too much into the details because literally I could talk about this for like 3 hours. So sort of, yes, sort of no to what you just said. But suffice it to say, there's always a balance, right? Um, you, there's tremendous benefit to filing patents, but filing patents too early before you understand the commercial strategy of your business can run the risk of basically like just wasting money. And then you could have a pivot and like not ever use it, or you could file a patent on something that is so like nebulous that you could never like detect infringement because you have no idea like what's happening under the hood of like a software, for example. So it's, there's so many factors at play, and like I'm happy to like talk more about it, but I feel like, maybe we're getting into a bit of too much of the weeds for your audience.
Yeah, yeah. No, this is something we have to do one-on-one. Okay, love it. Let's keep the conversation going here. I noticed there was a pattern of community that came up in your answers. For example, the time that you were in law school, or um, the advice you got from your advisors when wanting to explore your next steps post U of T. So my question is, what does community mean to you, and how have you found yourself part of growth-oriented and supportive communities?
Yeah, so community has always been an important aspect of my life, like for as long as I can remember. Um, grew up in like an Italian household. Italians are like really communal and all of the things. So it's sort of, I guess, in my blood to be that way. And I've always tried to embrace various different communities that could, further my own professional development, but also act as a support system. And I have been very, very willing to, give my time back too, and paying it forward for all of the people that have helped and supported me over the years. I feel like, it doesn't never hurts to ask, for help, or for support. And I feel like, being part of a pre-existing community and then asking for help is like the right path forward. Otherwise, you just seem very like, I don't know, contrived, like just like asking people for help without having any connection to that group of people. Um, so being part of communities has always been important. I've been part of communities in undergrad. In high school, I was the president of student council. In undergrad, I think I became vice chair or vice president of the neuroscience committee. And then in law school, I was president of the IP club. Are you seeing a trend here? Because I feel like now that I'm thinking about this and talking about it out loud, I feel like, geez, Louise, I just always have to do everything to the extreme. And then, as an entrepreneur, being part of various different communities, accelerator programs, incubator programs, groups of entrepreneurs to help support each other at various stages is so important. Because when you're starting a business, having like zero business experience, it's there's so many unknowns and there's so much ability for you to make like clearly wrong decisions where you could very easily learn from somebody else to prevent you from making a misstep early on. So anyways, there's lots there, but that's all.
Yeah, certainly comes with its values. And I think it's one of those things that the more you put in the beginning of getting to know people, over delivering in a sense and trying to help others, the more it will come back to you in times of
Totally.
need.
Yeah,
especially with
absolutely.
like things happening in today's world where like we're getting to a point where everyone needs help, whether it's layoffs, support. It's just a strange world to live in these days. But that's good. Um, let's talk more about your founder journey. I'm curious to learn more about how it was like when you started building your current product or company, and what was the initial traction like?
So I was working at a big Bay Street law firm as an IP lawyer, and I just sort of like ran into a friend of mine that I went to law school with. I think he was a year ahead of me, or maybe 2 years ahead of me. And he was telling me about, he was, dabbling and building some AI software. And I'm like, cool, what's AI? Like it was, this was 2017. Like I have no idea. Like no, people didn't, it wasn't part of common parlance, like anything to do with like language-based AI. And so in learning more about it, it was sort of like a holy smokes kind of experience in my mind where like I thought this is so clearly going to be the future of our profession because the legal profession and IP and patents in particular is full of just such convoluted language that's really difficult for like people to read and understand. And so building an AI system to help like cut through all of that noise and better grasp technology and terms of art and all of this like very nuanced language was going to be the future. And so I didn't really think much about it, and I just sort of like quit my job and started the company. I joined the company. Actually, the company had already started, I guess, formally without me, and I joined as a co-founder in 2018. And so that was a pretty crazy thing because I went from being a Bay Street lawyer to being a founder of a startup making $0 with no like product yet. We had like a prototype. And so that was like an interesting journey, like building the commercial version of the product, which I wasn't like, myself doing, but I was like very much involved in, and then taking that product to market and seeing people's reaction. And it was scary, but then it was also like, you know, like, wait a second, like you want to pay us? Like you want to pay me for this product? And he was like, oh my God, like what?
Oh, so you
I'm
weren't
gonna be a
expecting to be
millionaire.
paid at the time?
Pardon?
You weren't expecting to be paid for the product at the time?
I was, of course I was. But when you get your first client and you're like, it
Yeah.
actually happens, it's like, oh my God, it's happening. People want to pay for this. Like, this is a crazy feeling. It's like you're on top of the world. And you're like, wow, like we're just gonna be like ultra successful and like this is gonna be amazing. But then of course, like you have your ups and downs and your ebbs and flows and all of the crazy roller coaster ride of being an entrepreneur. Nothing gives you that like rush of like when things are going right, and then nothing feels as bad as when things are going poorly. And that feeling is getting compounded now as like we're in this growth phase with 12 people in the company. Now all of a sudden, like, I at the end of the day as CEO, I'm responsible for all of these people's jobs and like, bringing the grounding forward. So it's not just servicing clients, like it's also ensuring that employees are happy and bought into the vision and like enjoy their job and like believe in what we're doing, which I think is really, really important at the early stages for sure. We'll see, how things go, but things are going so well right now, and like, I don't know, it feels really good.
I really like the getting paid analogy. A friend of mine who also started something a few years ago, which didn't end up being successful, was saying the biggest disservice a founder can do to themselves is to keep their product away from people who are ready to pay for it. And it's mind changing. Like people are out there, they are ready to pay for it. Why are you trying to perfect something that, can already do the job that they are looking for?
Yeah, this is all like, classic startup mentality and wisdom is that, you got to get your MVP, your minimal viable product out there. And that minimal viable product is like the baseline of what somebody maybe, hopefully, would be willing to pay for that thing. And then you continue to build upon from there. And I would add to your friend's wisdom, which I do agree with, is that the other very important thing is that a product is never done. So you're never finished building. There's so much you can continuously improve upon and like iterating and refining and, bringing new features, but obviously being very thoughtful about it. Not just, being knee jerk. Oh, this random client asked for this very weird thing, therefore I should build it. No, you have to be very thoughtful and think macro level. Why is a client asking for this? Will other clients like need the same thing? And like you have to build things thoughtfully rather than just knee jerk. Okay, let's just add feature, 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 feature. That's not
Yeah.
the right way to approach it either.
I think that has been my biggest learning over the last year too, is that a product is never done. I imagine when you're working for a tech startup, you would get to a point where you have no more bugs left to fix, no more developments. It's all good, but I was proven so wrong. And I wholeheartedly agree with what you said here. I want to ask you about the psychology behind quitting your job. We had a previous guest who did a similar thing to pursue content creation full time. He's a personal finance creator. And I think at the time that he quit his corporate role, he had around a year of savings, which is referred to as emergency fund for some people. Did you have any savings when you quit your job? If so, do you remember like how many months of expenses were you roughly around at the time?
No savings. I just had law school debt. So yeah, no, I had nothing. I had literally nothing. And I was like, all right, so I'm gonna have to give up my condo, which I did not own, I rented. And I rented a condo at Adelaide and Peter for $1,600 a month, which made me like nothing today. But of course, it was way too much money at the time because I had nothing. How was I going to make ends meet here? So, I was engaged. Was I engaged? Yes, I was engaged at the time. And so I was like, all right, fiance, quitting my job. You thought you were going to marry a Bay Street lawyer, but psych, you're not. And so we were living together and we moved in with my friend. So the three of us lived together. So my friend from law school, actually, and he's actually from London, but he was renting like a 2-bedroom place up in Yorkville, just east of Yorkville. And I was like, hey, can we live in with you? Like me and my fiance who you've never met. And he was like, yeah, sure. So we lived together and my husband and I got married and still lived with him, my friend. while while we were like newlyweds. It was like a wild, but it was like the most fun time of my life. Honestly, I always joke around like when we had no money and we were like so freaking insanely broke, like that was the happiest time. It was like so fun and like crazy. It was a crazy time of our lives because, we just didn't know what was gonna happen. So yeah,
Yeah.
I had my fiance to depend on, I guess.
Wow.
Who became
It
my husband
definitely,
at the end of the day.
yeah, it worked out well. You definitely are on the riskier side of the spectrum, though, I would say that. I can't imagine myself, honestly, doing something without having any sort of savings set aside. I'm trying to learn more about my personal risk tolerance. I think 6 months for me is like a good starting point, but it varies from person to person, and it was good to hear about yours as well. As we're approaching the end of this episode, there's one more question left, which is the mystery question. And essentially,
Okay.
for context, this is a question that the previous guest leaves for the future guest, and you would be doing the same as well for the other guest, and they would not know about it until the moment that we're recording, like until now that I'm asking it. And
All right.
so the
Let's do it.
question that has been left for you is, who is someone you look up to as a role model or as an inspiration? You can take your time since you're hearing for the first time. You don't have to answer right away. But yeah, the question
Oh,
is
I have
essentially
so
a role model.
many. I have so many. Oh gosh, this is like so hard for me to answer because I just have so many people in my life that are just so inspirational in their own right. Um, and I try to draw upon each of them in like different facets of my life. I think I'm gonna use my mom, like so cliche, but I really am because she just has always been such like a rock, like just like a powerhouse woman who like takes on the weight of the world and like doesn't complain about it and just like goes and like, proceeds and is extremely like, proud, like not in a bad way, like in a very good way, and just like taking on insurmountable almost tasks and like balancing everything perfectly. And I feel like I've taken a lot of that from her. And like, I, begrudgingly, like, you don't want to be like your mom, but like, in some ways I'm like very grateful that I've taken some good qualities. And I've like, people are often like, wow, like, how do you do everything that you do? And I'm like, honestly, I have no idea. And I just do it. And like, that's kind of my mom vibes. So yeah, I'm going to give a shout out to my mom for being an inspo lady and like a powerhouse rock.
Amazing. Yeah, I gotta give it to you. It was not an easy question. Even I was thinking about the answer yesterday too. I think we all have so many people that
Yeah.
for different situations or different instances, they could be your role model at the time. It doesn't have to be one person because no one is perfect and we evolve. The more we know, the more we realize where we want to go. And so a role model who was there years ago could could not be the person you want to look up to in your current journey or trajectory or where you want to end up.
Yeah. Totally, totally. And I mean, like, there's so many other people that came to mind, and I just, thought like maybe like throughout my life, like my mom, as an example, has been like the, constant, right? That was like probably the best one. But I mean, there's so many people in my entrepreneurial journey that have been so supportive and I really look up to and try to like emulate in my own life and in my own business. And so, I mean, there's just so many people that I've been really blessed. Like I've always had like very excellent people in my life. I have such great friends. I have a great family, like great husband. My kid is like amazing. Like, just like everything's like coming up Millhouse, I guess. I don't know.
Glad to hear it. That's always a great thing. Awesome. So I guess I want to thank you for being a part of this episode. We covered a lot of great things. We discussed a lot of pivots, taking risks, pursuing things different than what you were expecting to do. I personally learned a lot about AI and IP strategy, so thank you for that. I'm gonna pass it to you for any final words that you have before we close this episode.
No, I had a lot of fun talking to you. It was been interesting, just kind of like recounting my life, like 10 plus years ago at Western, and how that whole experience has influenced my journey as an adult, who is 36 years old now. Jeez. But yeah, it was good. So much fun chatting with you, and I'd be very happy to connect with any listeners who were inspired, or I don't know, inspired, but like interested in my journey or anything piqued their interest. Please like feel free to share my info. You can look me up on LinkedIn. You can shoot me an email. I'd be happy to talk more about some of the crazy things that I've been through in my life.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Steph. It was a pleasure, and I wish you have a great rest of your week.
Thanks. You too. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.